So there's a huge new peace plan for Gaza on the table. And on the surface, sure, it's about politics and regional stability. But the source we're digging into for this explainer says that if you look just a little bit closer, this isn't just another political document. It might just be the fulfillment of a prophecy that's 1,400 years old.
All right, let's jump right in. The first thing that's kind of strange about this so-called Gaza peace plan is who isn't a part of it. I mean, for a plan that's all about Gaza, you'd think the main players would be there, right?
Take a look at this list. On one side, you've got the countries who signed on, the USA, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and others. But then look at who's missing. Israel and Palestine, the two most important parties, are nowhere to be found. And it doesn't stop there. Global heavyweights like Russia and China are out. The UK isn't involved, and France apparently refused to even join. So what kind of peace plan leaves out the very people it's about? What's really going on here?
To figure that out, our source for this, an analyst named Order1, argues we have to look way beyond the news headlines. He's not seeing this as just another political maneuver. He sees it as a possible trigger for a prophesied final war, connecting what's happening today to ancient religious texts.
And this quote right here, this really gets to the absolute core of his framework. He says, I interpret this phase according to the timeline told by the Prophet Muhammad 1,400 years ago, and what he said is coming true today. So for the rest of this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. Unpack that very specific interpretation.
First, let's look at this whole thing through the lens of history. According to the source, the key to understanding the alliances that are forming right now lies in the centuries-long, often bloody struggle for one city, Jerusalem.
And this moment from 1917 is absolutely crucial. When the British General Allenby took Jerusalem from the Ottoman Empire, he supposedly declared, "Awake, Saladin, we have returned." Now, this wasn't just a military statement. For him, this was personal. It was the epic reversal of a historic defeat from the Crusades more than 700 years earlier.
And this timeline really shows you that constant ebb and flow of power. In 635, the city comes under Muslim rule. Then, centuries later, the European Crusaders take it. Then in 1187, the legendary Saladin wins it back. You see this back and forth until we hit 1917, when the British take control from the Ottomans, which basically sets the stage for the entire modern conflict. But here's the kicker, a deep historical irony that our source says is critical. Who helped the British capture Jerusalem from a Muslim caliphate? Well, according to records from London's National Army Museum, it was around 400,000 Muslim soldiers from the British Indian Army. They fought for the Allies. Now, remember that detail, because it becomes incredibly important later on. Okay, so that's the first lens, history. Now for the second one, prophecy. This is where the source starts to layer specific religious texts onto that historical timeline, using them to interpret what's happening right now and to predict what's coming next.
At the very heart of his argument is what he calls the Great War Prophecy. It supposedly predicts a sequence of three things. First, Jerusalem will rise to global prominence. The source believes the U.S. moving its embassy there fulfilled that first step. Then, the prophecy says this will lead to the desolation of Medina, which will then trigger a final, world-altering war.
And this prophecy gets even more specific. According to the speaker's reading of these texts, a very specific sequence of events is laid out. A leader will appear in Mecca. An army from the region of Sham, which is modern-day Syria and Palestine, will march to destroy him. But that army will be miraculously swallowed by the earth. That miracle becomes the signal for forces from Khorasan, think modern Afghanistan and Iran, to rise up in his support, and eventually, they will be the ones to take Jerusalem. Now, keep that army from Sham in your mind.
So, what does this all mean for today? Well, the source argues that these powerful forces, history and prophecy, are literally splitting the world into two camps, forcing every single nation to pick a side for what he sees as a final showdown. And this slide really lays out that division pretty clearly. On one side, you have what he calls the Jerusalem Protection Alliance, led by the U.S. with countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan signing on. Their stated goal? Disarm Hamas and stabilize Gaza. On the other side, an opposing bloc is taking shape around Russia and China, with allies like Iran and the Taliban-led Afghanistan all united in challenging that U.S.-led order.
And recent headlines are being seen as proof of this great realignment. The source points to Russia's president, Putin, calling the Taliban Russia's ally. I mean, just think about that for a second. These two were bitter enemies during the Soviet-Afghan War. It's a shocking reversal. But in the speaker's view, it's not shocking at all. It fits perfectly into this prophetic framework.
So this brings us to the climax of the whole argument. According to the source, all of this adds up to a critical test, especially for Muslim nations like Pakistan that have signed on to this peace plan. The question is, are they choosing the right side?
And this is the powerful, stark warning issued by the speaker. He says, "We must think 100 times, lest we become part of that army which is prophesied to be swallowed by the earth." He is making a direct, unambiguous connection between joining this Gaza stabilization force and becoming that doomed army from Sham we just talked about in the prophecy.
And so we come full circle. The source draws this haunting parallel for us. Back in 1917, Muslim soldiers from India fought for a Western power against a Muslim caliphate to capture Jerusalem. The question he's asking now is, today, are Muslim nations once again being asked to join a Western-led force to fight other Muslims in that exact same region? Is history simply repeating itself?
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly challenging question. If world events are being viewed not just through the lens of politics, but through the ancient lens of prophecy, it forces us to ask, in this world of new and shifting alliances, which path will nations ultimately choose and what on earth will the consequences be?